r/AskReddit. People of Reddit, what are your supernatural experiences that you can't tell other people because they won't believe you? I remember this vaguely as I was only very young when this happened, but I have had my grandparents tell me the story many times. When I was 5 years old, I used to visit my grandparents on weekends. One of the things we would do is go and visit my great-grandma's gravestone and change the flowers and make sure it was tidy. Sometimes when my grandparents were doing this, I'd wander off and explore like many young children do. It was a small cemetery, so I was always in sight. I was stood by a gravestone when I heard someone say hello to me. I turn round and there's an old man with beard and a wicker hat stood next to a gravestone. He spoke with me and told me he was a farmer. He said he had pigs, sheep and cows and told me he was from Australia. I run back to my grandparents to tell them who I met and that I wanted to visit his farm. They look up and can't see anyone, so assume I'm playing around and it's something I've imagined. Fast forward a few weeks and I'm with my grandparents at the cemetery. We see someone visiting the gravestone where I saw the farmer, so I ask my grandparents if they can ask about the farm. My nana refused to ask, but my granddad said he would. We walk over to the couple who are stood at the gravestone. They were middle-aged and neither looked like the person I had spoke to. My granddad said something along the lines of, "Hi, sorry to bother you, but my grandson said he spoke to someone visiting this gravestone about a farm. They mentioned we could visit." The couple apparently looked confused and asked me who I spoke to. I described who I spoke to and they both looked very shocked. Apparently I described her dad perfectly, and her dad was from Australia and owned a farm which she grew up on. The only problem being that her dad was the one buried underneath that gravestone, and had been for the past 11 years. Sorry about the length of this post. When I was 8, I was sleeping over at my aunt's house in Southern California. During my sleep I suddenly woke up and saw a faint blue light at my bedside. I surprisingly wasn't scared, I was actually pretty calm all things considered. The light moved towards the hallway. The whole house was pitch black, and I felt the need to follow it. The light stopped moving at a couch in the living room, stayed there for about 5 seconds, and then faded away. I sat down on the couch trying to process what I just saw, and I guess I eventually fell asleep right there. I woke up a few hours later to commotion coming in from the area of the guest room, my aunt yelling, asking my uncle where I was. I ran in and saw a large armoire that was at the foot of the bed had fallen directly onto the bed where I was sleeping before. The thing was old and top heavy. It probably weighed 200 pounds plus. My aunt was so relieved to see me, she explained an earthquake shook the house. Not unheard of in California. I'm a heavy sleeper and didn't feel anything. I just got woken up by the yelling and scrambling around by my aunt and uncle. I don't know if I dreamt this and wound up on the couch because I was sleepwalking. I've never sleepwalked before or since, so that isn't a normal occurrence. I don't know if this actually happened. I don't know why I followed the light, because adult me would be scared as hell if this happened right now. We had listed our house for sale. Our daughter was 3, and we didn't really explain to her what we were doing. She just knew that a lot of nights after I picked her up from daycare we went to the park on picnics, out to dinner / for a drive in the national park because we had showings. On 2 separate occasions she looked up at me out of the blue and asked me who was in her room and what they were doing there. When I was 9 years old, I woke up in the middle of the night and felt like my glucose levels were low. Diabetic. Thus I got out of bed and was heading to the kitchen, and my grandmother was sitting in the upstairs living room, as she normally did, to read. She asked if I was okay and I told her I felt low and was grabbing a snack. She asked if I needed help and I told her I was fine and could handle it. Went downstairs, got something to eat, and went back upstairs to see she was no longer in her chair. Went back to my room and noticed it was 3 or so in the morning, which was odd since she always went to bed at like 8:39 at night. I didn't think too much of it, but found out that morning she had passed away at around 10 the previous night and had been removed from the house at around midnight. Just what my parents told me. So basically I had a full-blown conversation with my recently deceased grandmother. Okay, I have a pretty crazy story. When I was a kid, we moved into a house by the woods. One night as I was finishing up playing video games, I turned all my lights off and went to bed. As I was closing my eyes, something whispered into my ear, "Don't worry, we're here." It was the voice of a woman and it was so real I could feel the breath. So for the next 6 months after that, every night at around 2 AM there would be light tapping on my bedroom door. Like a light knock when you weren't trying to wake anyone else up in the house. I would always go to the door and open it, but there was never anyone there. I had gotten used to it after a while, and this happened every night. I had invited girls over from time to time and they heard it every single time. We could never figure it out. So I'm not crazy. About after 6 months a dark shadow appeared in my room in the top corner. It was swaying back and forth in the corner. It was solid black. I had never seen anything that black. The next day I finally decided to tell my parents. My mom said that the same thing was happening to her. As we were talking about it, our back door swung open and slammed shut as hard as possible. I never had an issue with it after that. I recently was visiting my dad because he got promoted and I wanted to celebrate with him. He lives in a real cool part of the woods in his trailer because of some money issues. Anyways, the camper is a cramped little thing and the bed I was offered was really hard to spread out and be comfortable on. So my dad offered me the hammock, which was maybe 8 featuring from the camper. I brought a pillow and a sleeping bag with me and I just knocked TF out. I dreamt that I was watching myself overhead, sleeping. I heard a pop, as if someone was popping their knuckles or something, and watched as someone dressed in all black started to do something to me. I woke up and sat straight up. I felt like something was incredibly wrong and that I needed to get out of there. I heard a similar pop, albeit a little more faint, and I just noped the duck out of there. I saw a UFO. It wasn't like anything I've read about before. It pretty much looked like an additional moon hovering near the horizon, but with red and blue lights moving around the edge. I have a few spooky ones, but the one that absolutely hurts my brain is when I was observing an ant on my tile floor, watching it crouched down, some 40 centimeters away, that just disappeared into thin air. At first it flickered really fast, like invisible, and then visible again, and then it stopped walking and just disappeared. I inspected that spot intensely right after, and over the next couple of years, there were no holes. I'm sure my house has a super tiny portal to another dimension, lol. Don't know about supernatural, but my husband and I live in the woods. One night we were having a bonfire and drinking some beers. We were buzzed but not drunk. We were looking at the stars when a massive triangular object with a light at all 3 points moved over us and just parked there. It blacked out the stars so you could see its shape clearly. It was several hundred feet up. We gradually started getting more and more freaked out. What the duck is that? What the duck is that? OMG. What the duck is that? And no further memory. Woke up in bed the next morning, both naked, with our clothes scattered everywhere. Neither of us sleep naked, and we were not buzzed enough to have engaged in any hanky-panky without remembering it. I woke up thinking that was odd that we were naked and clothes strewn about, and went about my morning, not remembering the weird experience until about 20 minutes after I woke up. The memory of it came back super gradually. Couple hours later my husband woke up, going about his morning. I waited for an hour or so before asking him whether he remembered what we saw. He had no memory until I mentioned it. Our stories and memory matched 100%. I am a skeptic of just about everything, but it felt like whatever it was knew we saw it, tried to wipe our memories, and then put us to bed. Assuming that humans just rip off their clothes and scatter them before they nest. I have never seen anything like that before or since. I'm an atheist, don't believe in ghosts, gods or the supernatural, and have always found UFO stories to be ridiculous BS, but I sure as duck don't have an explanation for it. This one is kinda dark and I'm not proud of saying this. My mum was dropping me off at school by car and I was just thinking of death. Don't know why. Then I wondered, when will grandma die? Now 2 things before I carry on. 1. I did not hate my grandmother, and didn't want her to die too. I was like 8 at the time and I never saw anything wrong in wondering that. Later, when my mum came back to pick me up at the end of the school day, she said grandma has passed away. It spooked me out, and please don't think I'm lying. It still scares me to this day. This one happened to me last month. A first for me and still mystified about it. Had a vivid dream in which a storm with pounding waves was slamming into a home perched on the coastline. An unknown person was trapped in a stairwell, with water covering them, and I dove down to rescue them. I could see them below me, but each successive wave crashed over the stairwell, As I struggled to get down to save them, I woke from the dream, almost in a cold sweat, and I got up to have my morning coffee. While reading the paper and having my coffee, I told my wife about the dream since it was real, as if I'd seen a movie about it. My ear began to itch, so much that I dug my finger into it and pulled out a big plug of sand. In fact, both ears had sand, but the left one had the most of all, almost a thimbleful. Not my story, but my father's. My father was around 7-8 when this happened. My father had gone to bed on a normal night, nothing unusual. He awoke to go to the bathroom but noticed something strange. He noticed that his godmother was in the kitchen and the counter dressed in all white. She told him that everything was alright and that she would just be moving somewhere different, but they would still be able to talk whenever they wanted. When my father woke up the next day, he learned from his parents that his godmother had been killed in a train accident the night before. To this day he still swears by this story. Last year I was home alone when my cell rang, so I answered. It was my grandma. She said she needed to be quick, but she loved me and to take care of her other grandbaby. I called my dad to ask about his mom, my grandma, because she sounded off. Dad told me she had died a few hours earlier from a massive stroke. Even worried that other grandbaby, my son, who I didn't know I was pregnant with at the time. So pretty much I got injured on my elbow and fractured a bone and tore a ligament, and the doctor had told me that it was gonna take at least 2 months to heal. Fast forward 1 week. I'm sleeping and I had a weird dream where I was standing on some sort of land, and it is like I was in a void, and I just see this hand grab my elbow, and in my dream it feels wet and I scream in my dream. Then I woke up to my mom's voice and she said that I had screamed and my elbow was literally covered in some kind of black liquid, and the next day my elbow was all fine and healed, and only my family knows about this. Honestly, this probably will be seen by 4 people or something like that. Edit. My family is very religious and have known people who've done black magic. Just thought you'd know. Got a story for ya. First, some backstory. Couple years ago my mother and father were going through divorce and it was anything but pretty. Dad turned to alcohol, was a real bad alcoholic in the past again, and eventually my mom kicked him out of the house for our safety. Peace for a while until money gets tight and we basically have to invite dad back to live as a tenant so we could pay rent. Things were okay for a while, but soon his drinking became a problem, and my mother and I received the brunt of his drunk rage. He hated my mom with a passion, and I swear to God that hatred manifested as some kind of specter, and it liked to torment me. I'm a late night gamer and usually stay up very late playing, and it was usually around 1 or 2 in the morning this shadow would start appearing. It was subtle at first. Saw something moving in my periphery. Computer was right next to a doorway to kitchen. Soon it would be more apparent. I'd catch it moving around, and was able to see what it looked like. It was this tall humanoid figure, probably 6 feet tall, kind of hunched, had glowing white eyes, and I swear it had claws. It would walk around the areas my dad frequents, like his office and a recliner he would often pass out drunk in. I would often see it standing around there or walking by, but nothing more. Near the end of the divorce, when we were gearing to move away from him, it started getting more aggressive. It would approach me sometimes as if trying to intimidate me, just like my dad. I would just tell it calmly it needed to leave, and for the most part it worked. My mom and I are kind of aware of these things, and when I told her about it, we started to sage those areas. One night we forget and this was the most aggressive it ever was. More late night gaming. As usual, I'm minding my business and catch it walking by again. Oh well. I take a quick break to grab something from the kitchen, and as soon as I turn away from the computer to get up, my heart skips a beat. The figure is standing right next to me, and this is the first time we've locked eyes. Those hollow white eyes stared at me and time sort of froze. I wasn't scared, however, and as if it was my dad, I told it off, saying it needed to leave. It was not to come back and would not be welcome wherever I was. It loomed over me for a little bit before turning around and walking off. That was the last I ever saw it. Haven't had any issues since, and only my family knows about it. My mother believes me, and she's seen it too. We even described the same figure. My brother also believes, but never saw it. Dad didn't care when I told him, but seemed interested when we saged. We've since moved away to a smaller apartment, and I haven't had any paranormal experiences since. I rarely speak with my dad now. It was such a weird experience, and it wasn't till after I told the spirit off that I got scared and went to bed. Once I brought home a fish and put it in fish tank. The next morning there was 2 fishes. This has seriously happened. Me and my then GF told it a few friends, but they called us insane, lol. We saw foxlights over a field one night while my BSA troop was out camping. Our campsite was out on one end, and we saw lights out across the field, where there was nothing but grass and more forest on the other side. We went out the next morning to go see what it might have been, and not a single blade of grass was disturbed. All the dew was exactly where it should be. No one had touched that field all night. There have been 2 instances. First, 2001. One day, my brother, 6 years, and I, 10 years, were just hanging out in my room and we both simultaneously sat up and looked at each other. We both had the same fearful expression on our faces. IDKY, but I felt I had to whisper to him and ask what's wrong and why do you look scared? And then he said, but why do you feel scared too? It was literally at the same time we both felt this unsettling feeling. A little freaked out, we decided to go hang out in the living room instead. As soon as we walked out, my mirror, that was nailed into the wall, fell forward, but it didn't break. I told my mom about what happened and asked to get rid of the mirror, but since it wasn't broken, she didn't think it was necessary to throw it out. Second, 2010, my younger cousin, 5 years, was in my room and I was sitting on my bed reading. I was babysitting her while her parents were at work and we usually just hung out in my room. She was just playing and singing in front of my mirror. Yes, the same mirror. And then I heard her laughing, giggling. I looked up from my book and asked her what she was giggling at. And she goes, she's funny, pointing at the mirror. I thought maybe she was just talking about herself because she sees her reflection. So I replied, yay, you are funny, silly. She then goes, no, not me. Her. My heart dropped. I then asked, who's her? She then pointed at the mirror. I dropped my book, carried my cousin and ran right out of my room. P.S. The mirror is still in the same room, my old room, which is my brother's room now. He hasn't had anything supernatural occur thus far, but he says he never really looks at it since the room door, when opened, covers it most of the day. Every time I take a seizure, I know what metal sounds like and I can't explain what it sounds like. I lived in a funeral home for a while as a kid. We had a speaker upstairs to listen for people walking in. So many times it sounded like someone was downstairs, but no one was ever there. I will often start thinking about someone I haven't seen for a long time, sometimes for days. Shortly after that, I will get a phone call from them or run into them. My former roommate told me his cousin had a dog that everyone hated. One day my roommate was alone in the kitchen with the dog and it stood straight up on its hind legs, stayed completely still for a good 10 seconds, stared him down, and shook its head. Then it walked away and curled up on the couch when my roommate's cousin came back into the room. I'ma make it short. It was years ago. I was sleeping, looked and saw an 8-foot tall oval-like thing with a dark face in the corner of my room. Turned away, closed my eyes, cried, looked back and it was gone. This thing put that horrible death feeling of weight in the room and you could tell it was still there even though it was gone when I looked back. I tell people I'm having a deja vu when I actually had a dream about that moment. I know I dreamed about it and it's not an effect of having a deja vu, because I remember my dreams every night and spend the entire day thinking about it. So when it happens that I meet that person or go to that place for the first time in real life, I say that I'm having a deja vu, but I know I saw it in a dream, because I remember them afterwards. Edit. I need to add more information. When I say that I tell people that I had a deja vu, it's exactly that. I only tell them, because I know the difference. I have the regular deja vu or deja arrive, but what I'm talking about is different. It doesn't happen all the time, but when it happens I know for sure it's a memory of a dream because I have a great memory, and tend to remember my dreams for a long time, even for years. I'll give an example. I dreamed about a country house, with an unusual backyard. It looked like a giant stairwell leading down to a creek. Nothing special happened. No one was there with me. I remembered that place because it was unusual, and it stuck with me for weeks. One day, a professor of mine invited the whole research group to come to her country house for the end of year barbecue. When I got there, I saw the exact same backyard. So I told her that I had a dream about that place and she thought it was the weirdest thing. From that moment I just don't tell to people that anymore. It happened again recently. I recognized someone from a dream when I had never met them before. I swear to God I keep dreaming about the future Acuratella mild stuff though. I saw a hand underneath the guest bed. So I was around 9 and playing on my tablet cause I was addicted at the time. My charger kept falling into the crack of the bed between the wall. So this happened again and I went to go pick it up. When I was about to, I was a dirty man's hand coming from beneath the bed hovering over part of the charger. This bed is a twin size and it's so small beneath it that a kid can't fit under. So I knew it couldn't be a real person. So I ran out that room and never went in there for over a year. Now it's my bedroom. When I was little, perhaps 3 or 4, the cat spoke to me. I don't recall what she said, but she told me something in plain English. You'd think she'd have a Thai accent, being Siamese and all. As an adult, even I don't believe it happened, yet I can still see and picture her speaking to me. Chalk it up to the power of a little kid's imagination. Sorry for bad English. I remember when I was playing football as a kid. I was maybe 10 or 11. I was the goalkeeper. I jumped so high I can see the crossbar of the swing at the same level as my eyes while catching the ball on my chest. The bar was about 10, 11 feet tall. A friend near me at the time saw it and was also in disbelief. Another when I was 13. My school was 3 floors high and I was on the ground level walking towards the building. My eyes to the front at all times. Just before I entered the building, my legs just suddenly stopped walking. Then there came a huge spit from above. Missed my head, about 3 inches from my face. I looked up. There were 3 a-holes spitting on people from the 3rd floor. I smiled at them and continued walking. At both times I would get this weird kind of little blowing of wind near my ears. It happened a few times during that my preteen years and something special happened each time. It never happened to me again after I was about 14. Now I am 33. Are we still doing not mine but someone I know? My uncle was a Navy SEAL during Vietnam. His objective was to go into the enemy's camp and blow them away. But while him and his squad of 4 SEALs were walking through the jungle, he heard something in the jungle probably 15 feet away. He signs to his boys to get low and probably 30 minutes go by, and he tells them it was probably a bird or something. And they walk up to the place where they heard the noise and there was tiger footprints and blood. They moved on probably terrified thinking they would get killed by the Viet Cong or the tiger. They completed the objective and were walking back to their camp. And he turns around cause he thought something was watching him and saw the freaking tiger on a rock staring at them with a dead Viet Cong soldier beside it. Not killed by the tiger. He told them to hurry do the frick up. Once I was hearing a voice. That voice was speaking to me. It gave me instructions where to go. I was totally scared but I had to find out. I ended in the woods near our house and it told me to look behind a specific tree and then I saw it. Beans. Everywhere. Bro, you made it to the end? You're a ducking mad lad. I'll cut you a deal. Smash like and subscribe for more curated content. It's free and that's a great price.